Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our panel discussion on autism in the workplace. I'm Carrie Melgar, the HR Administrator at Career Image Solutions, and I'm honored to be moderating today's conversation. As we celebrate Autism Acceptance Month, it's essential to shed light on the experiences and perspectives of individuals in the autism spectrum in the workplace. Now, let's take a moment for our panelists to introduce themselves. I'll start by introducing um, James Orman from People on the Go.
Yes, hello everyone. I'm James Orman, and I'm the program coordinator for People on the Go Maryland, as well as the vice president of the Autism Society of Baltimore Chesapeake. Thanks so much for having me.
Hi, James. And moving on to our next panelist, we have Marcus from Team CIS. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Marcus Whitman. I'm the HR apprentice here at Career Image Solutions, and I'm also a self-advocate in the autism community.
Next up, Rosanna. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Rosanna Tufts, and I am autistic and had a 15-year career in the HR field myself without knowing that I'm autistic. That was a relatively recent discovery. But I'm also a member of People on the Go and the Autism Society of Baltimore Chesapeake.
Awesome. And would you like to share what inspired you to participate in today's panel?
You're asking me?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Circle.
Well, actually, I wasn't so much inspired as invited. James Orman put me in contact with Marcus, and I thought that this would be an interesting, an interesting topic to discuss, from my own perspective of problems that I have had in previous jobs, not necessarily the HR one.
Okay. Awesome. Marcus, would you like to share what inspired you to participate in today's panel?
Sure. So what inspired me was when I was, long story short, I was talking with Hannah Gant, our president of Career Image Solutions, about autism and the acceptance month, and all that essentially got her wheels turning, and she eventually was suggesting I do this panel. She's like pointed out how I have very big into advocacy work. She's like, since you're the advocate, you should be a part of it. So after thinking it over, I'm like, yeah, I think I can. I think it would be great to share some experiences to help educate others.
That sounds awesome. And lastly, James, would you like to share what inspired you to be in today's panel?
Yes, absolutely. And I've been leading an autistic adult group by Autistics for Autistics for a couple of years now. One of the biggest topics is employment within the community. And the struggles that autistics have, particularly operating within an economy that is dictated a lot and run and structured for neurotypicals. But is not for autistics, generally speaking. And so I like to be able to share my experience and relay some of the thoughts I have regarding employment for autistics by way of showing that there are ways of including and incorporating autistics within a functional economy for that can work best for everyone.
Awesome. And we also have David from Career Images marketing team. David, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, thank you very much, Carrie. Good morning, everyone. My name is David, and I'm in charge of marketing for the Career Image Solutions as well as Kingdom HR. It's good to be here, and I look forward to learning a lot about autism acceptance and understanding employees' perspective as well. Thank you.
Okay, so now that we've heard about what inspired our panelists to join us today, let's dive a little deeper into the experiences that you guys have had in the workplace. And our goal today is to engage in a meaningful dialogue and share insights and experiences. I encourage an open dialogue and active listening throughout our discussion. So first up, James and Rosanna, can you share how your involvement in education, volunteer work, and professional setting, how that has contributed to your understanding and support of individuals with autism?
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and go first, and then I'll pass the ball to Rosanna. But yeah, I would say when I got my diagnosis of autism a couple of years back, I was employed at the time, and I ended up disclosing. It was a valuable thing for me to be able to do, but it actually ended up being a problem for me in my career, unfortunately. It was through that experience, though, of disclosing and finding out that there was still a massive amount of ableism within the workplace, that it helped me really understand better the struggles that people who do disclose have within the workplace, and the ways that they're treated differently simply because of who they are and how they think differently. And so it has been sort of my goal ever since then to spread the word about the ways in which we can do well if we're given the opportunity, to a fair and equitable opportunity. So I hope to bring my experience in my own working career to that, to help others.
Sounds great, Rosanna.
Yes, I have also um, another factor going on besides autism, and that is 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with a stage 4 cancer, and I pretty much lost that entire year. I could not work at all. And when I decided to dip my toe back into the working world, I realized there was no way I could take on a full-time job. I simply didn't have the strength. But so the work that I'm doing now is all freelance and part-time, and it has been it's if now that I know that this autism is a factor, it has forced me to be very careful about which kinds of jobs I will take because I may not have many support needs, but such as I do have, I have to treat them as non-negotiable. I fortunately was recommended for a job by someone that I know who so I now actually do um, I do work for a theologian named Matthew Fox,
Mhm.
and he's a liberal progressive theologian. And he does a daily meditation on his website, as well as sending it out to a 16,000 strong mailing list. And what he does is he sends me the text for it, and then I have to lay it out in both WordPress and in another program that's similar to Constant Contact.
Mhm.
And I have artistic license in terms of how I make it look. I usually have to put a horizontal image for a banner at the top and pick out a couple of other illustrations that go with the topics that he's talking about, and usually at least one video. And he has been very happy with my work, and it has been very congenial for me because I'm able to do it from home. It's remote work, and it calls upon both my skills as an editor and uh, my skills in doing the layout for desktop publishing.
Wow, that sounds
So
amazing.
that has been a very nice development for me. Unfortunately, I'm only doing it once a week, and I would welcome another client similar to this.
That sounds great. Thank you for sharing that with us. And Now, this question is geared towards Marcus and Rosanna, or James. Feel free to chime in if you would like to. But what do you want employers to understand about how your thought process works?
Sure. So, uh, now from my personal and professional experience as someone who's autistic and neurodivergent, um, with my thought process, like I don't always process information right away, or the way I'm processing information, it is not always clicking right away. So there's times, even if something seems like straightforward, most times I'm asking for clarity or trying to sure I am on the same page as whoever I'm working with to sure that you need me to do something, I can do it the right way, or do it whatever process is that needs to be done in a certain way, essentially. So like when like I'm asking like some follow-up questions, it's not that I'm not paying attention always. It's more that I'm trying to ensure that I'm on the same page as whoever I'm working with.
And I would say for myself, there are two big things that I like to tell employers. Number one is attempt whenever possible to be straightforward about your expectations. I think, a lot of the neurotypical world is about implication and suggestion. And those things will only work insofar as the other person really understands what it is that you are suggesting or implying. And I may not understand the implication, which means if you're not being direct, I'm not picking up on what you're saying. So that is really important for me, is to be able to get a very specific and very clear direction. The other thing, though, is as it relates to individual tasks, I am better if I understand exactly what it is that I'm doing with that task within the bigger picture. So if you give me something individual, I may be able to accomplish that task on an individual basis. But how does it fit within the bigger picture? What is the context? And if I don't have that, I may not be able to execute the job to the best extent that I can. So give me the context, allow me the opportunity to participate fully, and don't segment my job in a way that does not allow me to be able to fully integrate my knowledge into the position.
Mhm. Rosanna, would you like to add anything?
Yes, I did say that I had to be careful about which jobs I take because there are certain jobs I would be super good at and others I should not even attempt nor be expected to. Chief among those is any job where I would be required to multitask and have my attention be hijacked every 30 seconds. As an autist, I hyper focus on one thing at a time. I now have to tell people it's a feature, not a bug. If I am not, if I am required to multitask, what's going to happen is I will be so distracted that I will lose track of whatever I had been doing in the first place, and things will fall through the cracks and people will get mad at me.
Yeah, I think that is very insightful. Um, Especially um, as an HR team, I feel like we strive to make everybody feel comfortable and play into what everybody needs. And I feel like that was very insightful, especially
Yes.
for people who work.
Well, yeah, something else I'd like to say is that I'm the kind of person that you can give an assignment to, and I can go off into a corner or a closed, quiet room to work on it and report back to you when I have something, when I have a decent, have made progress on it or I've finished it altogether. And odds are I will do that kind of thing better than anybody else on your staff because I also have a hidden talent for ghostwriting. I can make a report sound like you wrote it. And I didn't even know I had that talent until I was called upon to use it. And it turned out I had a real knack for it. It's not something anybody taught me.
Oh, wow. That sounds great. That's amazing.
Which people on the go has found is very useful in writing testimonies for the Maryland General Assembly.
Mhm. And piggyback off that, would you like to share what are some stressors or challenges that you have in the workplace and how you overcome them?
Oh
Rosanna?
yeah, well, of course the the difficulty with being distracted because I do hyper focus,
Mhm.
and I also um, have difficulty transitioning from one thing to the next. And sometimes, if I have finished something, I need to just take a little bit of a break to sort of clear my head. And when I'm working at home, that'll often look like doing a crossword puzzle. If somebody were to see me doing that or catch me doing it in an office, they might think that I'm goofing off. But it actually is essential to how I can best function, to be able to erase my mental blackboard, as it were.
James, would you like to add on to that?
Absolutely, yeah. I have two things that kind of interrelate to each other that I struggle with, and it relates to the idea of having a non-apparent disability and how people treat that. There's oftentimes a lot of grace given to those who are identified as disabled or as a person with a disability. But if your disability is not apparent, if it is more difficult to see, that grace is not often provided. And that can be especially difficult if you have the kind of difficulty that I have, which involves my difficulty with perceiving tone. I have difficulty picking up on it. I have difficulty relaying it. And others who do not struggle with this difficulty because they do not see it, do not often give me that grace. And this is an endemic problem within the American workplaces, that if something is not visible, if something is not apparent, it is generally not considered. And that is something that I struggle with, and that I know that others struggle with as well. And part of what I am doing within my advocacy work is attempting to get the word out that that these things can be acknowledged and managed without sacrificing productivity in the workplace. In fact, I believe that if these things were better acknowledged and have that grace provided, that both the employer and the employee would all be more successful regardless of their neurodivergence.
Yeah, I completely agree. Marcus, would you like to share? What are some stressors or challenges that you have in the workplace?
Hmm. So I'd say some stressors or challenges I have is trying to show I've had jobs where like been denied opportunities. The excuse was always, oh, you don't have enough experience, but you don't want to give the opportunity or acknowledge that I could do it. You decided to essentially put you have me in a spot you like, you when it's convenient or employers, you'll want to add responsibility. But those don't really come with any new opportunities. And I find those to be stressors.
Mhm.
I've also been in workplaces where it's like several managers and people high up in the company. It's like, oh, this is our first autistic person in our workplace, our first and only autistic worker. And like, okay, well then let me move to other roles. Let me take on other responsibilities. Don't try and pigeonhole me in a role and then put me in, as well as put me in situations where you're knowingly setting me up for failure.
And how do you think employers can overcome this as well as you?
Um, so employers, they need to expand uh, their perspectives. They need to also acknowledge that uh, there are invisible disabilities, and I feel that it is also the employer's responsibility to educate themselves on how best they can uh, work with someone with these invisible disabilities to maximize both the employee and employer's potential. For the employees, say one, know your worth. Second, make sure you know your job inside out, understand all your policies, advocate for yourself, and even look for other job opportunities.
Mhm.
Uh,
That's very similar to what James was saying earlier too, as well as Rosanna, and I like that that keeps coming up,
yeah,
because it shows that there can be a lot of improvement in the workplace, and that employers there's ways that employers can help with this situation. Um,
yes,
but Marcus and Rosanna, this question is geared towards you guys. Can you discuss whether having a job coach or one-on-one support in the workplace can help individuals succeed? And if so, how? Marcus, would you like?
sure. I can go first. So, as someone who's worked with some job coaches in the past, like I had some when I was in high school, I would say, yeah, can help if you have a really good job coach who um there to like support you and work with you, help you learn and take on new challenges. As well, I've also worked um, after high school, so I had some job coaches in high school from my high school's work study program, and then after high school, I kind of got due to where my high school worked with some government agencies. They're for like after high school supports. Um, so like initially working with this agency to get funding a job post graduation. Um, I kind of got like didn't really get support from that agency, and then they kind of farm. I feel that I got farmed out to their like I believe it was some type this or other organization. I'm not. I think it was a private employer, but worked with said government agency. Kind of, I got farmed to them, worked with them. So, all they really had me do is like update resumes and fill out applications.
Mhm.
Did some interview prep with me, but was pretty much on my own. Um, I ended up, they did help me just find my first retail job out of high school. Um, I did well on the interview, but then went off topic. But the manager was still impressed with me at the end, but she still hired me. And then uh, the job coaches came one or two times and then stopped showing up. And even some of the managers were like, "Do you still have the job coach, or are they still coming?" I'm like, I have no idea, honestly. And feel my point is, if you have an active job coach or one-on-one who's like there or like knows like gets to know you, builds a rapport to understand what supports you need and how much involvement they need to have, as well as I guess when like to like transition you to whether or not you need them still like after you land the job. I think a good job coach should be able to evaluate whether you can your level of independence and support essentially is my point.
Okay. And what about you, Rosanna?
Yes, I would say that for the autist, a job coach is indispensable. You really can't do without one, at least in the early months, I should say, because the jobs that I've had where I have had one, whether it was officially recognized as being a job coach or not. When I've had one, I have thrived. When I've had a job that has been sink or swim, I have floundered. And I could slog away for years without really figuring out how to keep people happy.
Mhm. James, any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I very much agree with both what Rosanna and Marcus said. And to go off of what Rosanna said about it being essential, I think that is the case. And I think that is sometimes less about the autist and sometimes more about the employer, because I think sometimes the employer really needs to have that go-between because the employer has no idea how to treat the autistic employee. It's not often just simply on the autistic employee that doesn't know how to get along. It is often the employer who has no idea what to do.
Word.
And following that, James and Rosanna, how do you figure out what tools you need for success?
I'll go first on this, and I'll say when it comes to my tools, I'm constantly looking for them actually, and I'm constantly reforming them and asking others what tools they use, and seeing what I could incorporate into my repertoire that actually works for me. And I'm adjusting on a very regular basis. But I have learned that the tools that best work for me are the ones that not necessarily that I create myself, but that I have control over. And the way that I want to put that is this: there are resources that I can get from others, and I think that's great. It's always great to be able to obtain resources from others and to have others be able to assist and or help with certain things. But if they don't know how you think, or that whatever resource they give you does not necessarily work for your way of thinking, it's not often as valuable and can sometimes be somewhat counterproductive. So I found when I can take the lead in my own support, when I can take the opportunity to create my own tool, and then
Mhm.
to incorporate that within the employer's framework, rather than having the employer give me the tool or the support, that's how it works best for me.
Oh, wow, that's nice. Would you like to share any of those tools?
Naps. Like, no lie. Like, and to what I think Rosanna was even mentioning this a moment ago, it's like if I need a break, I need a break. It's not one of those things where it's like, oh, just get by, James, just like suffer through it, power through it. I'm not here. I'm not mentally here. I need a moment. Now, if I have a planned structure, if I have a planned day, I can build in those breaks and I can have, 6 or more hours worth of a meeting. I was in 6 hours worth of a meeting yesterday after my 8 hours worth of work that I did for my actual right, it was 2 hours for an in-person meeting and then 4 hours for an in-person autistic meeting and 4 hours for a remote autistic meeting. And again, that was on top of my 8 hour workday. I was able to do all of that because I was also able to fit in 2 naps that day.
Wow. That's a lot. What about you, Rosanna?
Yes. Well, I think that as far as tools go, I think a lot of that is can be dependent upon being aware of what your needs are. And I am something of a MacGyver. I can look at a thing and see how it can be done better, or develop some kind of a tool from scratch for other people on the team to use. And I can give you an example of that with the job for Matthew Fox. He has he's written almost 50 books, and there was not already in place a database of website links to be able to go and purchase them if he makes a mention of a particular book in a meditation. And I created that list with the links, the then put them all in alphabetical order, the images of the books, so that you can know which book you're looking for, so that the text and the image match, and all of that. That's not something that was already in place when I started the job, and I created that.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. And Marcus, would you
I've
like to add?
also made I've also made updates to the procedures manual and figured out certain procedures that were kind of cumbersome and inefficient, and I figured out how to sort of reorder the steps so that it would make more sense and go more smoothly.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's also very important. Um, I feel like a lot of policies and procedures can sometimes be overwhelming with a lot of just wording, and sometimes it's best for it to just, get straight to the point. Um, but Marcus, would you like to add anything?
Um,
Any tools that you need for success?
I guess I'd say uh how I evaluate that is think it depends on the job, and it's figuring out how the job works, and uh there's alternate ways or to do something, best ways to support said job. um I've also kind of found that in my other job outside of CIS, whenever I'm out on the parking lot or collecting shopping carts and all that, I've somehow become the go-to person between the rest of the people out on the lot and managers. So like they're like, oh, since they know I'm getting ready to change departments soon, they're like, before you leave, make sure they get us new like ropes for the lot, get us this tool, get us that. They're like, yeah, I've somehow ended up taking on that responsibility inadvertently. Like also noticed that at this the other job I work that if we mention something directly to our department managers versus the supervisors for the department, like we mentioned something other to the department's manager or the two assistant managers, it's like, hey, can we get this bucket to, can we get like a plastic bin to keep all our equipment in? Something like that. Like we'd been talking to the supervisors for months about that. Soon as I mentioned it to like the department manager, yeah, let me see. I think we can get you that. So like it's also knowing like who to talk to, I feel.
Yeah. And James and Marcus, this question is more geared towards you guys. What does advocacy mean to you?
Oh, well, to me, it's about standing up or speaking up for another, or for your community in a way that is intended to be selfless, right? I think I distinguish self-advocacy from advocacy in that way. Self-advocacy is about standing up or speaking up for yourself, and I believe advocacy is more about others. That doesn't mean that it can't benefit you, which is, I think, one of the best points to make about advocacy, which is when you change the world for the better for other people, I do believe, I really, really, really do believe that it ends up changing the world for the better for you too. Because now you live in a kinder, gentler world, one that is more respectful of others, one that considers others, one that helps others be their best selves. And when others can be their best selves, they can then help you be your best self in the ways that you know how. So I do believe that part of advocacy is the idea not only about helping others, but also helping yourself and your community writ large.
I 100% agree. It's true. Marcus, would you like to add?
Yeah. So I do agree with James that there's difference between self-advocacy and advocacy. With self-advocacy, it is, I do agree that it is geared towards advocating for more specifically for your needs versus advocacy in general means I would agree it's about picking up or using your voice or trying to help others more, or your community more, help the community overall. But also, like, I do think that both can also be used to benefit the other, like with self-advocacy, cases of self-advocacy where someone's like stood up for themselves, that's actually ended up sparking major change. Like there's been a bunch of cases that ended up going through the Supreme Court, the US Supreme Court, without getting too political. People stood up for themselves, like right to get paid for roles or compensated fairly for said roles, or fairly admitted to uh, academic program, and then from there, that's ended up benefiting larger communities, not just that one person.
Mhm. Rosanna, would you like to add to that?
Well, actually, since my um, awareness that I've been autistic all along is still relatively new to me. I mean, I only found out less than a year ago. I would say that this self advocacy journey is something I'm still trying to figure out for myself.
And knowing that now, how would you say you would advocate for yourself in the workplace? And James and Marcus, please feel free to chime in. Rosanna?
Yes.
Mhm.
Well, I did already mention a couple of things. That okay. Sorry about that.
No worries.
Yes. Okay. Where was I? Yes, I did already mention a couple of things that I know specifically I need uh, to establish as boundaries and hard limits, and they include not subjecting me to numerous distractions throughout the day, give me the time to focus, and give me the time to take a mental break at intermittent times.
Mhm.
Those are two that I definitely know about.
And, and
There's another one. There's another one. And that is the louder you yell, the less I hear.
that's a good one. That
Treat me civilly.
that's a good one. I know for myself, one of the things that I had to learn about advocacy in the workplace is just simply standing up for what's right. I've had in my evaluations, for example, some things that I felt were unfair. And rather than just going along with it, which is what I usually did back in the day, back before I got my diagnosis and understood my differences, I stand up for myself now and I say, I don't think this is right. You tell me that I need to start perceiving tone. I'm sorry, a disability is a disability. You don't tell a person who is unsighted that they need to watch where they're going. We can all work together to try and help each other navigate some of these tougher circumstances, but don't tell me that I need to be changing myself because you don't understand me. And so part of my advocacy journey is not only standing up for myself in that way, but also not allowing myself to bully me.
Yeah,
And the way that I would put that is, right, like I can internalize a lot of that abuse and say, oh, it is my fault. I'm just not listening well enough. I'm just not paying attention well enough. No, it's not about that. Like, this is something that I genuinely cannot perceive. And I don't need anyone else telling me that I can, especially myself.
that was very powerful, James. That's very deep. Marcus, would you like to share
Um,
how you advocate for yourself in the workplace?
yeah. So it's setting boundaries, knowing your rights, knowing when to stand up to managers, uh, even push back. By push back, I mean you're standing your ground, you're not being rude, you're also not letting, you're reinforcing your boundaries, and also need to reiterate companies' policies and standards. I have done that to managers who've gotten in my face and tried to argue. I've literally quoted the handbook right back to them, as well as uh, when they've when I've had a manager ask me why I'm doing something a certain way. I'm like, so and so, who happens to be your boss, had told me to do something this way. It's like, well, I didn't receive this order. Well, I've also reiterated, well, this order came before you started at our job site. I've learned to push back on stuff like that and even reiterated, I'm not trying to be smart with you. I'm saying I am doing this. I was told to do it this way. I'm like, unless I see like a new policy, new memo from, or get a different order from said boss or someone higher, then I'm going to do it this way.
And what would you say is the biggest challenge that you faced in the workplace, Marcus?
Um, One of the biggest challenges is I've debated with myself mainly about like whether to really disclose uh being autistic to certain employers, because I don't want to be seen as just the autistic person. Yeah, I have disclosed my disability as I've needed um, to employers to advocate and help set my boundaries. It's also, I'd say, knowing when it's whether or not this is a good environment for you to work has been one of my biggest challenges. There's times I've felt maybe I should have left this workplace sooner. Maybe I should have seen the signs that this was becoming toxic, that these managers were going to behave this way. This action was going to be taken against you for the way the job is set up, or the environment, your work environment. So I would say my biggest challenge is always trying to really evaluate the job environment. There's times just been like gone through phases where I'm like, I think I might leave, or oh, I'll stay. So again, it's trying to really figure out whether or not it's worth staying. Is this a good environment for you? That is my advice.
And James, I see you nodding your head over there. Would you like to add anything to that?
Oh, very, very much so. And I agree with what Marcus said. And I would say my biggest challenge sort of broadly is ableism in the workplace, and specifically the idea of supports and accommodations. Um, when people with disabilities cannot get supports and accommodations, that means that others who do not identify as people with disabilities do not get supports and accommodations either. And if there's one thing that I learned through my advocacy journey, it's that everyone, absolutely everyone, I don't care who you are, at some point in your life, you need supports, you need accommodations. No one comes out of the womb able to feed themselves. you know, everyone needs someone else at some point in their lives to be able to help them or provide that support. And when we deny people that in the workplace because we say we cannot afford that as an employer, or we cannot accommodate that as an employer, what you're essentially saying is we are not in the business of employing people. We are in the business of extracting labor. And that is not accommodative. That is harmful to people. And it's harmful in particular to people with disabilities, but just again, writ large, it's harmful to workers. And if employers were more willing to give accommodations regardless of someone's perceived ability, I think, again, employers could benefit as well as every employee, regardless of whether or not they identify as a person with a disability.
That was very insightful, James. Rosanna, would you mind sharing your idea of a successful workplace or a successful workday and how that would look like?
Oh, a successful workplace? Oh, yes. I mean, I would say that it's one that's courteous to everyone, that's where the bosses are so often focused on the top down that they forget about the bottom up, about how sometimes their decisions adversely impact the people on the bottom of the ladder. And it's not just about shareholders, it's also about stakeholders. Who are the people who are buying whatever your product or service is? Who are the people underneath you who are providing that product or service? How can you enable them to do their jobs well? And that, in terms of the bottom line, that when you're too focused on the bottom line, that can get kind of lost. You do not want to have a boss who knows the price of everything and the value of nothing.
Very well said.
Um,
Very
and Angel vouches for what I just said. she, she likes to video bomb me.
Oh, she's so cute. And lastly, to wrap up our discussion, James, what is your motivation in the workplace?
Ooh, yes, I love this. Okay, my motivation in the workplace is to do the most good.
Mhm.
That's just as I think as plainly as I can say it. But I would say even if I were to elaborate and use all of the words that I I really like to use sometimes, I would say it's about matching talent with need. And the idea that everyone, absolutely everyone, I don't care who you are, has a talent. And there are needs everywhere. And when we can best identify the talents of an individual, we can then best match those talents with the most need and help ourselves as humans, not just as people with disabilities or as Marylanders or as Americans or as people in the workplace. We can come together if we match talents with needs and if we recognize that everyone has them.
Mhm. Awesome. And um, before we conclude our discussion, I'd like to open the floor up to our panelists for any final thoughts or additional insights you would like to share.
Um, Real quick, I'd like to uh piggyback off of Rosanna's thoughts how um with the workplace it shouldn't be focused on top to bottom, uh, where the people at the top are looking for the shareholder maximization, essentially. That philosophy um, should be about the people who provide your products and services. The one should focus on your consumers as well as the people who are the day to day keeping your organization running, the ones that do your create your products or services. Uh, that's my thought. And so actually watching real quick, I saw a video the other day talking about how um Home Depot used to employ retired tradespeople, then they got a change in leadership. One executive to go with the philosophy of shareholder maximization and got rid of having the retired tradespeople work full time for them. So they have suffered. They've companies like the not just Home Depot, but others that um, used to be like, hey, let's employ these people with expertise who will do well. They got rid of that philosophy. Now I think all of them are not doing as well as they used to in some way or form.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and I want to echo what Marcus said. You know, the idea of penny wise, pound foolish. The idea that like, oh yeah, you know what, we're going to chase the bottom line here and miss the bigger picture. And I would say that's a very typical thing in the American workplace. And if there's one other thing that I would note is just because something is currently doesn't mean that's the way that it has to be. And if we want to have agency within our own lives as people, we should understand that we have the ability to change things and then work to do so.
Take care of your employees and they'll take care of your customers.
mhm. Rosanna, any final thoughts?
That was it.
As we conclude our panel discussion on autism in the workplace, I just want to say thank you to our panelists, and everyone who contributed to this project. We've gained valuable insights and perspectives that will help us create a more inclusive and supportive workplace for individuals on the autism spectrum. So let's continue this important conversation and work towards building a more inclusive society. We will have our second panel on April the 26th, and I hope to see you guys there.
I'll be there. Thank you so much for having me today. This was wonderful.
All right, thank you.
Have a wonderful day.
You too.